Welcome back, Trippy Hippies, for the second episode of Hard Talks Podcast. Wherever you're listening, thank you. If you're over on YouTube, thank you for watching. If you want to hurry and click that like and subscribe button to support the show, you would literally make my day. I'm not kidding. It really doesn't take much to make my day. But this is a podcast talking all things taboo, history, conspiracies, groundbreaking tech advancements, and scientific breakthroughs. Pop culture, aliens, spies, whatever interests me that week, really. So sit back, relax, and get ready, honey bunnies, for a trip down a rabbit hole like none other. Because today, we're going to enter into an underworld, one that's not hidden, but is in plain sight. All right, but nobody wants to talk about it because if they do, they're deemed cuckoo bananas, conspiracist wackadoos, or like extreme Republicans. Extremists, period. You know what I mean? But let me ask you something. It's valid. When you think of the world's most rich and powerful families, who do you think of? Kardashians? No. The Hiltons? Oh my God, that's hot. This is my best impersonation of Paris, God bless her. Possibly even the UK's royal family. I mean, they're rich, not as powerful as they once were, but wealthy, sure. But what if I told you that they weren't even close to being the most rich or most influential? That's right, guys. I lumped the royal family into that. Right? We all know these families for their monetary worth, but did you ever think about how they flaunt it? I mean, the wealthiest, most powerful people, they would never. They aren't on the covers of Forbes or on the reality TV shows. Instead, they're cunning businessmen or women who brilliantly diversify their money, so you never really know their net worth, and it's a trip, all right? They camouflage themselves within mega corporations, behind politicians, owning pretty much everything. Everything between gas, oil, electric, even the world's gold. Federal Reserve, hello. And maybe even controlling the weather, all right? You with me? Good. They hide in plain sight. They maintain low profiles. They're careful not to cross anyone or gain too much attention, sugars, because they don't want it. And they're calculated. No. These aren't some dark figures you might be imagining either. They're not some villains from Mordor. No, fam. It's far more than the affluent celebrity families that we've come to know and possibly love or maybe even envy. Maybe a little bit. Have you seen Khloe Kardashian's fucking pantry? Happening right now, right in front of us, at the forefront of every banking, economical, and government system in the world, are 5 families. Did you hear my voice crack? 5 families who debatably own it all. Okay? It's rumored that they own 80% of the world's wealth, if not all, maintaining deep-rooted connections with all of our world leaders and having a dark association with the Illuminati and many other secret societies. I don't mean to laugh, but like everyone laughs when they hear that word. But we'll talk about it. Many don't believe that there's someone powerful enough or who could or would control our governments. But in this day and age, doesn't that feel a little naive? You think we're in control? I'll leave that last tidbit up for you all to decide, but as we dig deeper throughout the weeks, you may grow more convinced that these families aren't only corrupt, but maybe evil. Today's episode will be a bit more lengthy, only because they seem to be, air quotes, the head of the beast, if you will. Today's episode is all about the House of Rothschild, a German Jewish family who's maintained their wealth, empire, and legacy for over 2 centuries, all right? Why you probably never heard of them, you ask? Well, your part's no secret. They don't want you to, sugar. But I say that's just not fair. It's really not. So over the next 5 weeks, we'll uncover why these 5 families are so controversial. And of course, my favorite, we'll dip our toes into the ever so abundant pool of conspiracies. Because who doesn't love a good conspiracy? So in short, if you Google Rothschild conspiracies on Wiki, it will tell you, quote, the Rothschild bloodline conspiracy theory alleges, I don't know why I feel like I have to do a stupid accent right now, but hang with me. that the family is part of a larger network of elite families, including the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. Shout out if you know any of these names. The Morgans, the Bushes, and the DuPonts, all right? They exert a vast control, a secret control over the world's financial, political, and social systems. People who believe in this theory believe that this control is exercised through a web of interlocking financial interests, political connections, and secret societies, end quote. I like how my accent went to like Valley Girl. But it's far more cosmic than that, my friends, so let's dive in. But quick disclaimer, because you know me, many discredit these conspiracies because they deem them as anti-Semitic, all right? So in respect for what's happening around the world and the fact that the Rothschilds are Jewish, we will talk about these topics with that in mind and treat such conspiracies with a grain of salt and with those with respect, as we all should. But this is my opinion. Whether this family is of certain faith or not has nothing to do with the parts that they've played throughout history. You can decide, but the opinions expressed within this podcast are solely the authors, aka me. And they don't reflect the opinions and beliefs of the websites or any of the affiliates that the information was, mined from, all that data. On that note, if you don't agree with anything that I have to share today, what an opportunity this is, isn't it? Share with me. Share with me. I always want to hear from you. I want to learn. This is what podcasts are for, shawties. To start a conversation, to make us think, to learn from one another, yeah? So if you have anything to add, comments, questions, concerns, you can kindly share them with me at hardtalkswithbnh@gmail.com. Same email if you listened before. Or you can talk to us on the social medias at Hard Talks Podcast. But personally, again, this is my opinion, I think that what we're about to dive into today has a lot of weight to it. So, I don't know. I think these families are corrupt, but the whole, question mark around them is, to what extent? I don't think it's for legacy or, control. I don't know if it's for a more nefarious thing, for a world order, but I do think it's important to remember that with every conspiracy, comes a little tiny grain of seed, might be the truth. I'm not saying that at all true, but I'm saying it's not always tinfoil hats or aliens. You know what I mean? And I'm saying, if you haven't heard, hello, aliens are real. The government totally yeah. I read that 70% of the conspiracies that you hear about turn out to be true. So just keep it in mind. And however you filter this information, that's up to you. And these families, especially the Rothschilds, have been extremely successful at hiding their hands in history. Because, the more research I've done, it's just, you can't completely cover up money, right? And money talks. And if you follow it far enough, it paints a not so pretty but vivid picture. These things don't just line up by coincidence, guys. Especially with the same people and for centuries. It's crazy. But that said, it's important to stay skeptical and to question things, right? Question it. Because then you're not so susceptible to believing everything at face value. And that's a good freaking thing. Who actually runs the show? It's a good question to ask. Because who really paid attention in government class? It's not the person we like to blame the most, like the president, or his efforts to help our planet, which I'm totally game for. I love the turtles. Don't come for me. But he's just simply a puppet, guys. A face for the fallout. And whatever words fumble from their mouths, whatever actions they take or don't take for that matter, comes directly from whomever is pulling their strings. It's no secret that unless you're crowdfunded or backing yourself financially in a presidential campaign like Bernie Sanders or Trump, that most candidates are backed by major companies or corporations. And while that may not seem like an issue, hello, I wish I had my phone, ring, our whole country is backed and infused and run by these corporations. What's the big freaking deal? Well, my little love doves, I will tell you. Since money rules over everything, right? Especially politics. We can all agree on that, right? Or do I have to put a period after that? Money rules over everything, especially politics, period. All right, so don't argue me on that fact. It's just like, so long as money and politics are synonymous, our governments will remain corrupt. That's just how it's been. It's how it always has been. You think we take a hint. But here's a scary truth. Our world is not run by our government leaders, even if they do have the best intentions. It's run by the people that own them. These mega corporations fund candidates who are willing to do their greedy biddings. People still act so shocked to learn that the money backing these politicians running in these elections come from only the 1%, aka these rich families who have all their hands in the right effing cookie jars, right? So they say only 1% of our population will see extreme wealth within our lifetime, but if you take that 1% of the 1%, then these guys are what you get. You feel? And I mean, wouldn't that be idealistic to be born into one of these families? Have a silver spoon lodged so far up you don't know any different? Like, what a freaking world. But these people use their money to buy favors, pick who's in administration, set policy in governments all over the world. Okay, all over the world. It's not just the U.S. It's all over the world. And that's where the controversy comes in, you know? Like, why? What's the end game? They have enough money and influence. They could change allegiances and economies. They could change the course of war, or, goddess forbid, create one. You know, I'm talking enough money to buy people, even countries, you know, like island. Sorry. Let's buy Israel because we can. You know, Kardashian who? Some say they're just so rich, like they're playing God, and they're nothing but like a strategic or ingenious bankers from a long line of family old money. But like either way that you spin it, they're behind some of the most outrageous cases of insider trading, and they monopolize a lot of the world's markets today. They do. Google it. The Rothschild family has been able to maintain their fortune, like I said, for more than 200 years by keeping it in the family, aka promoting cousin marriages, you know, like incest. That's what you call it nowadays. They promoted this for centuries until it was frowned upon, you know, and then they later started working together with these other really elite, high status families. You know, we'll get to know some of the other ones. And like, for example, it isn't within these 4 other families, but just to give an example of how elite these unions still are today between some of these people, I read that one of the youngest Rothschilds, James Rothschild, married Nikki freaking Hilton back in 2015. Like, you'd think you couldn't go up from being a hotel heiress, but like with a shiny last name like Rothschild, you say I freaking do, you know? But another famous marriage I found was between Alexander Hamilton. You guys recognize that name? He was considered the father of the First National Bank. He's the guy on all of our $10 bills. Bet you didn't know. He was the first Secretary of Treasury during Washington's presidency. That guy. He married Lady Elizabeth Schuyler. And pay attention to this stuff, my friends, because even though their last names are different, she's still a Rothschild. Like, this becomes a common theme, especially as we go through these episodes, because, like, you know how your cousins have different last names, or they, like, change after marriage, so technically you're still a so-and-so, but you don't carry the name anymore? You'll see a lot of those kinds of Rothschilds, or like other members of these families at the head of these companies or whatever. So they're able to like maintain these monopolies without breaking the law. It's like a loophole they found. But their last name is no longer associated. It's really smart, actually, on their part. Like if you're into white collar fraud, but or whatever. So it's just like pay attention. A lot of people think that like Hamilton was an agent for the Rothschilds because like when he married into the Rothschild family on December 14th, like 1780, this was like a time when the people were debating a central banking system. So Washington was undecided about it, pretty much. And Thomas Jefferson, and Attorney General Edmund Randolph, like, they didn't like the idea. They advised against it. So our good first president did the solid thing and asked the Secretary of the Treasury for advice. Hey, what would you do? And Hamilton responded with a gusto. He responded with nearly 15,000 word declaration in favor of the central bank. And George Washington signed a bill which basically provided 20-year charter for the First National Bank because he was like, okay, he's for it. Cool. So if he wasn't an agent, he like sure freaking profited off his new family's advancement. But I read that they would control the family's women also by dictating who they could marry. Otherwise, they would lose all their inheritance and the right to the family name. I'm like, it's jacked. It's jacked to think that women really didn't have any rights within, like, it's, yeah. But that's how they kept it within the family. Financial and later on royal and noble status that was earned. It's contained within these families, and to do so, to like keep it growing as much as possible, pretty much, you know. And the family's interests cover range still today from various fields, including financial services and real estate and mining and energy and mixed farming and winemaking and nonprofits. But the Rothschild's fortune really began with like one epic man, I suppose they could say, during a Renaissance time where times were changing. The people liked the idea of having a place to safely store their assets. They came up with this really crazy idea, this thing called, what did they call it? Banks. But like electronics, it kind of turned into a monster, you know, and took over the world, right? So this man, his name was Amschel Meyer Rothschild. He lived from 1744 to 1812. And Amschel actually changed their last name from Bauer so that his family and future empire could have a Jewish last name. Yeah. Some suspect because, like, Ra in German means red, and Schild means sign in German. And, like, many think it represented the red sign at the first bank he ever opened in Germany, but I don't know if that's true. Apparently, this red sign was in the shape of a hexagram, which is like the Jewish star, which 51 years later is a blue hexagram on the Israeli flag. So remember that. Many think there's a link there, but that's up for debate, and you'll hear why later. But evidently, the blue hexagram represents holiness and God, while if it's in red, it represents the latter, the opposite. So, I don't know. For now, what we know is fact about Amschel. He was really the main guy who went on to create the international banking empire, which is what we know as the Rothschild fortune today. You know, Amschel grew up in a part share of a home in a Jewish ghetto. He was super poor. Germany, what is now Frankfurt, Germany, and like highly motivated to elevate himself and his family, he sought to find a way to gain financial control and establish a banking business in the 1760s. That's how far back we're going. After much success, not only in business, but between the sheets, baby. He had 5 sons, which I mean, like, for the time, like, woof! 5 sons? How great is that? So in order to expand his business, he established an international banking empire through those 5 sons, by strategically placing them as head of each of the 5 major European financial institutes. That was in London, Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, and Naples. I want to visit. I hear it's lovely this time of year. So Amschel placed them in these 5 financial capitals so he could take over the economies in these countries, essentially. The names of these sons were Amschel Jr., Solomon, Nathan, Kalman, Jacob Meyer, Rothschild, and you'll probably get to know Jacob the most and Nathan. But it probably wasn't as hard to take over the world back then. Like, I imagine that it was pretty easy to dominate if you were any type of smart. Like, I could see it being easier to take over the world. I'm not gonna lie. Like, there's not as many people. It's not as populated. Most people were uneducated. And also there was no middle class. Like, it was either incredibly wealthy or a peasant, you know? Like, you're not worried about corruption. You're worried about survival and eating. I wonder if I could have taken over the world. Maybe if I was born a man. I don't know. But the Rothschild brothers were so esteemed. The 5 Rothschild sons were granted noble hereditary ranks within the Holy Roman Empire, the Austrian aristocracy, and the United Kingdom. Hello! Their nobility would pass to the next generation. So think about that. Lots of them are dukes and whatever. But before I move on, I suppose this is where I should slide in the mention of like Daddy-O's association with the Illuminati. Like, oh, woohoo. And before you roll your eyes and think of like Kanye West or some other pop icon who brought this back to the limelight in, I don't know, the early 2010-ish, I don't know. The Illuminati is a real secret society that began as early as 1492. Freemasonry and other societies go back even further. Like, societies like go back to the creation of man. Like, if you think about it, and like whether there is involvement from an extraterrestrial or supernatural force, or sheer humans who share the same warped ideals, that's what's up for debate, which or the other. Regardless, it's still a very, very real thing. And what they do and speak of, we'll never know unless we're invited to become a member. So I'm not sure there is a cancellation with that membership. I would just read the fine print. You know what I'm saying? It is written in an article I found called Meyer Amschel Rothschild, the Architect of the Illuminati on humansbefree.com. That Amschel Meyer Rothschild was the original founder and kind of like visionary, if you will, of the group. And that shocked me. But this article stated that it was he who originally drew up the plans for like the creation of the Illuminati. And then he later entrusted Adam Weishaupt, I don't know, we'll call him Adam, to see the rest of it through. It was him who completed the organization on May 1st, 1776, which is actually my birthday, May 1st. And I don't know if that's like a yeet, but yeah. But the purpose of the Illuminati was, and debatably still is, I suppose, to divide all non-Jewish people through political, economic, social, and religious means. The opposing sides were to be armed and incidents were to be provided in order for them to fight amongst themselves, destroy national governments, destroy religious institutions, and eventually destroy each other. End quote. Sounds really familiar to something I've heard of in history class, like, I don't know, fucking Nazis and Holocaust, but what do I know? I'm just a girl from Utah. Anyway, in the beginning, this was all under the orders and finance of Meyer Amschel Rothschild, and the concept has spread and is followed within Masonic lodges worldwide to this very day. So Adam, the guy who took care of the Illuminati after Amschel was like, there you go, the co-founder of the Bavarian Illuminati, which like technically infiltrated into Freemasonry, made this revealing statement on May 1st, 1776. And it says, quote, "The great strength of our order lies in concealment. Let it never appear in any place in its own name, but always covered by another name." Fucking awful. Sorry, that's not in the quote. But by establishing reading societies and subscription libraries and taking these under our direction and supplying them through our labors, we may turn the public mind which way we will. End quote. That's also gross. Side note, there's a Freemason temple in Ogden, not 10 minutes from my house. And there's like another smaller Freemason building in Layton, Utah. Like, no joke. I'm not joking. It's creepy. There's signs on the outside. It's creepy. But I mean, like, if all that's all true, like, what the frick? I mean, like, it sounds exactly like everything we're about to learn these guys are actually already doing to this day. So it's kind of like, But moving on, after Amschel passed, he died. You know, his inheritance and his legacy was given to his 5 sons. And they basically were building on top of their father's successes. I mean, like, what a freaking setup. They were in control of Europe's economy. And not just one country, but working together, basically the continent. All right? The continent! And by the 19th century, the Rothschilds were at the height of their powers. They were known all around the financial world, all over. You know, they became a household name. They really did. In all these different countries, especially in Europe. Their great fortune and ingenious business minds gave them great freaking power. And they utilized that power a lot by effecting some extremely significant events in human history, and they profited greatly from them. And I'll give you some examples. I mean, there's many more. Google your own shit. I'm for real. But during the Napoleonic Wars that spanned 12 years from 1803 to 1815, Napoleon the Great feuded for territory and control to form a French empire. For a minute there, Napoleon was like on the winning side. And Napoleon wasn't no pussy. Short, sure, pussy, nah. But it wasn't until 1813, nearly the end of the war, where Nathan Rothschild, head of London's banking capital, reminder, he felt that Napoleon was threatening his business, aka his stronghold on England's banking institutes. And that's when he decided to get involved. Nothing he did was for good. But like Nathan Rothschild began financially backing the British Army forces with huge, massive sums of money. Like the sudden infusion of precious metal shipments to the armies equated to 10 million US dollars in 1815 alone. Okay, that's equivalent to like $900 million today. And this bloke just had like 10 million hanging around in 1815. That's how rich these freaking people are. Okay, let's think about that for a second. That's how much control these people had back then. I'm not even talking like the King of England couldn't even force the Rothschilds' hand to back their military at this time, because even back then, the crown already owed them money. Okay? Rothschild found himself more powerful than the King of England in this instance. And he would go on to find that same power over many other world leaders throughout his lifetime. And this enormous financing operation from Nathan Meyer and his brothers made them the most influential family in Napoleon's defeat, okay? And the end of the Napoleonic Wars, like they ended it. And it said that the Rothschild brothers together set up a whole network of contacts, including royalty and politicians, couriers, shippers, whomever they could, so they could create an intel operation. And boy, did they. They had spies everywhere. They did the damn thing. And they inserted them into like every realm of society. That's how they made so much money at the end of the Napoleonic Wars, through the Battle of Waterloo. They knew what was going to happen before the rest of the freaking world. But in this moment, take into consideration like how many days or weeks news would travel. It would, like, so slowly, because it was either by courier or, geez, a homing pigeon. Could you imagine back then? While London was under a different impression, the outcome was actually pretty glorious for Nady Nate. At the end of the battle, more British reinforcements showed up, like I said, and they kicked ass, and they reclaimed Waterloo, and it resulted in that great victorious awesomeness that I told you about. They totally defeated Napoleon, ending his terror. But that seems awesome, like, woohoo, thanks Nathan for arming us with a badass military. You're just a savior. What a peach. Wrong again. He had his own interests in mind. Since the Rothschilds had intel coming in from everywhere, it said that the outcome of the battle was shared with Nathan Rothschild as soon as it ended. A political pamphlet called, this is in French, so excuse me, Histoire et Défense et Cruce de Rothschild. I don't even know. I can't even finish it. But it was printed in European presses in 1846 by Georges Danville under the pseudonym of Satan, actually. So I don't know if that's a coincidence, but he basically recalls actions taken by Rothschild that day by writing, on June 18th, 1815, immediately after the Battle of Waterloo, Rothschild was rushed to the Belgian coast and paid a fortune to cross the English Channel in the middle of a thunderstorm. He arrived in London 24 hours before the news of Napoleon's defeat was officially announced, and he was seen making his way to London Stock Exchange, end quote. Satan exclaimed. Woo! This pamphlet went on to allude that when Nathan Meyer arrived back in London, allegedly his first stop was exactly that, to the London Stock Exchange. In efforts to, I think, cause the stock market prices to crash, he sold all of his government bonds. And this created an immediate panic because everyone trusted their good old boy, Nate. Why wouldn't they? He's trustworthy. He's a banker. But by suppressing the media, Nathan selling all of his bonds, he made everyone believe that Britain had lost the Battle of Waterloo, when in fact they hadn't. See he's tricky. So everyone else started selling their government bonds off like hotcakes, which made the cost of these bonds plummet. And what do you know it? While they were at an all-time low price, Nathan Meyer Rothschild bought them all back up. It's brilliant. And when the news finally broke of Britain's great victory over France, prices of these government bonds soared back up, like skyrocketed. But by now, Nathan Meyer Rothschild owned every freaking single one. And then he'd go back and sell them to the public at a higher price, resulting in an immense profit for the Rothschild dynasty. Like, I honestly don't know if it's ingenious or if it's evil, but it's probably the biggest case of insider trading in social and economic history, if it's all true. And although the Rothschilds were already incredibly wealthy and affluential from investing in the war efforts, this stock scam would have paid like a huge dividend for their entire bloodline to come and still come. While one Rothschild loan would not only pay off French war indemnities in the 1870s, they were still way back, and it would set up the family for generations to come. But another also allowed the British government, aka Big Bala Nady MR, to become the powerful Suez Canal Company's primary shareholder. Now, this is huge, and you might not get it, but like funding and heading the construction of the Suez Canal, which is like in Egypt, was brilliant on their part because this canal connects the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, giving them complete control over European and Asian trade. It's vital to that half of the world. And another example of their involvement was in the independence of Brazil in the 1820s. The Brazilian Empire was seeking independence from their parent state, Portugal. Now, Portugal agreed, like, yeah, you can become your own country, sure. But you need to pay us a compensation fee of like 200 or 2 million pounds is what it was. And they couldn't afford it. So who none other to ask but Nathan Meyer Rothschild. Winks. In other words, Nathan Meyer Rothschild loaned Brazil 2 million pounds to be their own country. But not without contingency. It was agreed that Brazil must take on the debt that the Portuguese government had accrued from Nathan's company called N.M. Rothschild and Sons. So not only did they profit greatly from these deals because of the interest they would go on to make from the loans alone, but Brazil was now responsible for paying off Portugal's debt to a Rothschild company. So it was really like a double whammy. But the biggest thing to me that I didn't realize was Brazil was not the only country to thank the Rothschilds for becoming a country. From the beginning, the Rothschilds had their hands in the creation of Israel. And this is really a weird tidbit, but some say that the Rothschilds gave Israel its name because of the Anunnaki gods. Like the gods that were worshipped way back in the day by like people of ancient Mesopotamia times. And they say if you take the names Isis, which is like the goddess of fertility, magic, and medicine, and Ra, the god of the sun, and El, god of wisdom and creator of mankind. If you put those together, you get Israel. Which, I mean, like, it could be possible. Like, why else is it named Israel? But if that's true, like, Anunnaki, man, like, that's some crazy ties. Some weird stuff. But according to Simon Schama, an English historian, the Rothschilds own about 80% of Israel, thanks to something called the Balfour Declaration of 1917. And I never heard of this. So in short, the Rothschilds at this point had already had a hold in the U.S. And more on that in a few. But it was at this time that they were asked to fight on Britain's side in World War I, which would surely ensure Britain's victory over Germany, right? Yeah, it did. It did. Because we're awesome. We're the freaking best. But in return, if they helped, Britain would give the United States just a little thank you. You know, a little thank you for their help. Like a little country. Like a little tiny one. But as we all know, size don't always matter. Yeah, and this little country comes with a large presence and a whole lot of baggage, like we come to know. And I'm not talking about your exes, baby. At this time, this country was known as Palestine. How freaking ever. This was a huge problem, as you could see why. Because Palestine was never Britain's to give away. It rightfully belonged to the Arab and Palestinian people who lived there for centuries. So many people believe that the Rothschilds are behind a little bit of the conflict in the Middle East, between the Palestinians and the Israelis today. And I don't necessarily want to condone that or say I believe in that. You know, the Rothschilds are responsible for the creation of that war because it's been going on for so long. Like for thousands of years, way before anything in the 20th century. But I do believe that the Rothschilds made that rift a lot worse, absolutely. Because on one side, you have the Palestinians who are fighting for their country. It belonged to them first. But then you have the Israelis who are like, well, it's been bought out. It's been given to us. It's rightfully ours now. Now, some believe that's what the Rothschilds are fighting for. If there's no entity behind this air quotes world order idea, that they're working towards an all-Jewish state, which they kind of accomplished with Israel already. I will say trigger warning a little bit here because there have been allegations of anti-Semitism throughout the decades against the Rothschilds, actually, that have mostly been debunked. But, to explain where that might come from, like any religion, there are many that share some core beliefs and values with several small differences. I mean, how many different churches fall under the Christianity belief nowadays? You know what I mean? So the Rothschilds are Zionist Jews, and many of them still claim to be Zionist Jews. And Zionist Jews believe in a state just for the Jewish people, or similar to how ISIS believes in a state only for Israelis, but because they'd benefit from an all-Jewish state and maybe, want to keep it that way. I don't know. It's not only for religious reasons, but because they are profiting greatly from it. Israel, still, they are profiting from the conflict. That's the truth. And the biggest financial backers of Israel are Britain and the United States. And I feel like that there's a reason for that, Have you ever wondered why we are so steadfast in standing behind the country of Israel? Or why our world leaders like to spin it like it's because it's some holy land or God's country? But really, what I think is that there's just been a business deal that's been done. Israel is the United States' top trading partner with an annual bilateral trade of nearly $50 billion in goods and services. And that's in 2022. And the U.S. can thank the Rothschilds for that business. So many think it's to defend our nation's interests, but since the Rothschilds control at least 80% of the country, and since they had that declaration in 1917, that Balfour Declaration, they think that the U.S. and Britain may be quick to cover the Rothschilds' interest as well. But another sad truth, friends, is this. Our economy would starve without conflict. Governments thrive and make so much freaking money off of war. And I think families like these capitalize and take advantage of the fast-paced, ever-changing climate of the political and economical world. Because we make so much money off of fighting. Side tangent. I often wonder like, we go to bat for so many other places because we need to keep the cash cow moving, right? Like, maybe that, I don't know. How our country profits so much off of war used to confuse me too. But I learned it's because, we sell our weapons. And just between 2002 and 2016, America sold arms and ammunitions worth $197 billion to 167 different countries. And from 2001 to 2021, top 5 American contracting companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, Boeing, they earned $2.2 trillion in public funding. And then these companies sell weapons to countries such as like Iraq and Libya, Sudan. And now if you're like me, you think, well, that sounds really silly. Why would we want to arm others with our bombassery? Money, bitches. It doesn't matter which country is victorious. The companies supplying the arms without exception are the ones who profit and win. Plain fact. For instance, America claims to have spent like $2 trillion on Afghanistan, but then we haven't seen any real development in the last 22 years, right? Well, America has been indirectly transferring the same money spent back into their same country by supplying American-made weapons. And do you know what that's called, friends? That's called war profiteering. But all that could be for another episode. It really should be. I just want you to know that this global corruption is happening all over every day. I'm getting off track there. So to sum it up, more wars fought, more money made, war fuels our economy. I actually heard that we have to go to war like something like 4 years to keep our economy alive and going, but I didn't fact check that, so Google it. Anyway, maybe they just like need a place to constantly be fucked, right? Like a forever bad place conflict. So they just always have a cash cow. They always have a place to be getting rich off of. I mean, it's just so sad because it comes down to difference of faith and deep-rooted misplaced hatred. But I don't know. That's something to really think about. The history of it all. But the plot doesn't stop thickening there. No. The Rothschilds even have ties to the Vatican, which if you don't know, okay, let me drop a little bomb on you. The Vatican is the smallest country in the world, and it's nestled into the heart of beautiful Rome, Italy. All right, the capital of the Catholic Church. You feel? It's where His Holiness the Pope resides. It's actually been an independent state since 1929, and it's perhaps the most powerful entity in the world. Still. It houses the largest and oldest collection of archives and information that has been locked away underground in its miles and miles of twisting tunnels. And I would love to tap into that because it very may well contain like the answers to the ages. It would be cool. But for context, I needed to share how astronomical the influence and the power of the church had because it was responsible for many major historical events, and it really was a pillar to a lot of the creation of Western civilization. And though the church doesn't have the reign on the world like it did today, like it once did, the Catholic Church still has an enormous authority. And not to mention, honey bunnies, a freaking fortune that they still sit on today. Yeah. Anyway, before Italy was a country, the Rothschilds owned a bank. Remember that one son I mentioned? He was conveniently headed in Naples. Wink, wink. Well, he donated large loans to the papal state and various nobles, such as like a king of Naples and like a duchy or a duchy, I don't know, of Parma, and a grand duchy or duchy of Tuscany. But when Italy unified in 1861, the Italian aristocracy forced the Rothschilds to close that Naples bank. But as we know by now, the Rothschilds could never accept a defeat like that. So when the Naples bank closed, that branch was essentially absorbed by the Vatican Bank. Yeah. Their close association knowingly continued well into the 20th century. In fact, some think that their ties run so close, like the popes and the families, because of an instance where Karl von Rothschild publicly met with Pope XVI, I don't know, Roman numerals, you do the math, in 1832, where he was seen not having to bow and kiss the Pope's ring or his feet, which is absolutely unheard of. You know, the Pope is the highest level of the clergy, the leader of the worldwide Catholic Church. And over centuries, the Pope had more power than a freaking king, okay? You kiss this guy's feet, unless you have some major digs in, you get me? And if there's one thing that the Catholic Church upholds, it's tradition. And paying your respects to the Holy Father, well, that's a part of it, friends. So to me, that kind of shows how high up these guys were to even the Pope. And it's also rumored that the Queen Elizabeth herself and the royal family are shareholders through a private bank account and part business owners in a handful of like Rothschild-owned companies. So, could you imagine attending a Rothschild dinner party? You're sat next to kings and queens and popes and duchies and world leaders across the globe. I mean, like, what mighty company they must keep, right? Like, imagine trying to crack a joke with those people. The Pope, a king, and a prostitute walk into a bar. That wouldn't go over very well. But as mentioned, the Rothschilds were very smart in how they diversified their money in as many different industries as they could. Okay? Everywhere. They're everywhere. They bought up one of the largest mining corporations in the world. A company named, you might know this name, Rio Tinto, which is headquartered in Melbourne, Australia, which was founded in 1873 by a Rothschild venture. Now the company produces uranium, iron, copper, coal, diamonds, and more, and the company is worldwide. Great. So it operates through many subsidiaries, meaning there are many smaller companies controlled by one big company. I had also briefly mentioned that the Rothschilds were in the winemaking business for like over 150 years, right? They quickly became the world's preeminent family of wine. And Nathaniel, this is a different guy, Nathaniel Rothschild opened a winery in 1853 called Chateau Mouton Rothschild. Today, the Rothschild-owned Carmel Winery dominates the Israeli wine industry, producing an extensive range of wines and spirits, receiving 70% of the country's grape production. Coincidence? I think not. And like any family, they weren't all bad seeds. Of course not. There was a member of the family who even got into zoology. There's a picture of Walter Rothschild, who is second Baron Rothschild, if we want to get technical. He studied zoology, and he would actually like have zebras pull his wagons around wherever he went. Right there. It's weird, but a lot of insects and other species have the last name Rothschild in it. Like, hello, I'm going to name you Zabading Rothschild beetle. 1. That sounds good. But there's a Rothschild giraffe, and there's another 153 insects, 58 birds, 17 mammals, 3 fish, 3 spiders, 2 reptiles, 1 millipede, and 1 little wormy that also carry the Rothschild name. Yeah. Right. It wasn't until after the Revolution of 1776, really the birth of the U.S., that the Rothschilds gained control and already had their presence in North America. One of the biggest things that the Rothschilds did to gain control in the U.S. was they literally bailed out the U.S. government. And I imagine like the Monopoly guy sitting in a jail cell, but it's not that. Not that kind of bill. Long before the 2008 recession or even the Great Depression, there was Panic of 1907, and then there was the recession of 1895. And during this year, our young country was going through one of the worst recessions in early U.S. history. It really was. The government was running low on gold. And if you didn't know, our paper money today is based on the value of gold. So they say if our economic system fails, gold is supposed to maintain its value. But I mean, like, who can afford to go out and buy gold? I can't. It's something wild. Like I read yesterday, that's like $2,062 per ounce. And that's like as of today's recording. And like it's $66 and something cents per gram. You know, about to get my mine pan out of storage, right? Who can afford that? But anyway, our government's low on gold. And even back then in great American fashion, we were already worried about paying back our debts. Random side note. Did you know that there have only been 2 presidents in history that have balanced our budget and cleared the United States debt? The insane murderous President Andrew Jackson in 1835 and Clinton. Anyway, at the time, President Grover Cleaver wanted to avoid defaulting on the government debts. So, what do? You reach out to a Rothschild. He reached out to Nathaniel Meyer Rothschild, who worked with J.P. Morgan. You hear that name? Yeah. Together, they loaned the United States government the money to pay the entire debt completely off, saving the U.S. Treasury completely. And then in 1919, the Rothschilds and the leading trades in the industry started meeting like twice a day to set the price of gold. Did you hear me? The Rothschilds were the ones who set the actual price of our gold. And while gold quickly became the family's most valuable asset, like you think it would, it also became the benchmark of the world's assets. The Rothschilds set the price of the world's gold from 1919 all the way up to 2004. Moment of silence. I need more crickets. Yeah, that happened. But then that's when Barclays took over and started setting the price of gold. But you can see how heavily involved they were in the U.S.'s banking and economic construct and history as well. It's not just Europe. They saved the U.S. government again in 1893. And another bank panic when J.P. Morgan was like, hey, babe, we need to do something. They formed a syndicate to prop up government reserves with a shipment of over 62 million in Rothschild gold. Now get this. 10 banks control all 12 Federal Reserve Bank branches. And those include N.M. Rothschild of London, Warburg Bank of Hamburg, Warburg Bank of Amsterdam, Lehman Brothers of New York, Lessard Brother of Paris, Kuhn Lub Bank of New York, Israel, Moses Seif Bank of Italy, Goldman Sachs of New York, which actually is owned by the Rockefellers and the Vanguards, but we'll talk about the Rockefellers in a couple weeks. And then J.P. Morgan Chase Bank of New York and Rothschild Bank of Berlin. You know, the Federal Reserve, like I said, it's not federal at all. It's privately owned. And there's multiple branches within the Federal Reserve in which these families own. They have been infusing the U.S.'s economy and banking systems for decades. Many people believe that they own every central bank in the world except like 3 countries. And the only 3 countries that are supposedly left without a central bank is like Cuba, North Korea, and Iran. All communist countries. This is one of those theories, we don't really know for sure. I can't say that's a fact, but a lot of people like to debate it because basically all these central banks that exist around the world, they're all part of a World Bank. And the World Bank is controlled by the No, the Rothschilds, or this order of elite people. I don't know. Oh, another thing I needed to mention was that Sir Evelyn and Lynn Forrester de Rothschilds, they have a firm that recently announced the signing of a definitive agreement to acquire 70% interest in Weather Central LP. Oh, this is the world's leading provider of interactive weather graphics and data services for television, web, and mobile. But since Weather Central owns a lot of forecast modeling, a lot of conspiracists speculate that this may be the Rothschilds in on weather control or geoengineering. And now that they own Weather Central, people worry that they'll begin to manipulate weather patterns with the technology they now have access to. And this is actually quite possible, guys. It's not cuckoo bananas. This has some very good proof that this can be done and that it may be already happening. The most recent case being the fires with Hawaii, but I'm not even going to go there. Another thing I wanted to bring up was the Bilderberg meetings. It's a real thing that happens every year. It's top secret and happens at really nice, beautiful places. And it's basically a meeting for the elite. According to another famous name we'll get to know, David Rockefeller, he said about the meeting, quote, "We are grateful to the Washington Post, New York Times, Time Magazine, and other publications whose directors have attended our meeting." So that right there admits that it's real, that they attend it, and that all media from all sides go to these meetings. And quote, "They respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subject to the bright lights of publicity during those years. But the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march toward a world government." End quote. That's David Rockefeller. Now, usually they're careful to shut themselves up, and that was in 1991. But there have been videos of pedestrians asking other members or Rothschild family members directly about their involvements, or secret societies or the Bilderberg meeting itself. But the statement by David Rockefeller is kind of damning. I mean, clearly they're talking about some shit they don't want us to know about. I mean, it's even rumored, I don't know if it's rumored or confirmed, but at the meeting in 2017, they were talking about Donald Trump and what him in power would look like. So I guess anything's on the table. Another famous person at that 1991 Bilderberg meeting was Bill Clinton, alongside high other ranking members of intelligence agencies, reps of the world's banks, military, big bankers, more. It's very sus. Actually, in 2016, during Hillary Clinton's campaign run, Hillary flew in on a private jet to a Rothschild fundraiser in her honor. So she was actually backed by the Rothschild family. However, they probably backed Trump too. Hell, they probably back everyone to maintain their control. But here's the tea. When emails from Hill's private server were obtained by WikiLeaks, they found emails back and forth from Hillary and Lady de Rothschild. And it shows their relationship, to say the least. They have very warm exchanges like, "You are the best, sweet dreams, dear. I remain your loyal and adoring companion, much love." It's odd because her writing in all other emails is pretty short and concise, to the point, maybe even a little bitchy, except for those emails to Lady Rothschild. So what if they're together? Lady Rothschild married into the family in 2000, but she's kind of married to the head of the current day Rothschild family, Sir Evelyn de Rothschild. But I doubt the Clintons ever married for love. It seems more like a business transaction to me. But either way, it's something funny to think about. An interesting conspiracy theory actually is that the Rothschilds orchestrated the assassinations of Lincoln and JFK, supposedly because they threatened to shut down the central bank or the Federal Reserve, which was a massive nay-nay because they were banking from that. In fact, it was said that only 2 U.S. presidents, like Abe Lincoln and John F. Kennedy, were not either Masons or elite members of affiliated bodies, and both of these non-Freemason presidents were then assassinated. So a lot of people speculate something fishy was going on because they were then replaced with a Freemason president. Lincoln was assassinated by John Wilkes Booth, and he actually was a 33-degree Freemason, which is like the most high and honorable rank that you can achieve within the Illuminati or Freemasons. And Kennedy's assassination was like determined by the Warren Court Commission, which included Supreme Court Justice Earl Warren, Commission spokesperson Gerald Ford, and former CIA Director Alan Dulles, who Kennedy actually fired when he was in office for like his suspicious activities. But those dudes were all 33-degree Masons. Gosh, that's a tongue twister. But they all determined like Lee Harvey Oswald, the guy who supposedly shot JFK. They said that he was the lone gunman responsible for the assassination. It just doesn't make sense. I don't know. Many onlookers believe that these presidents were killed because they wouldn't bend to the will of these families' money or great power. But I mean, like, look what they were able to accomplish with the free minds. Abolishment of slavery, women's rights. Any way you look at it, innocently, or if they have some sinister motive. It's just plain weird. The connections, the ties, I don't believe in coincidences. Who does today? They've never argued how they gained such authority or how they've achieved such successes or maintained such old money over such a long period of time. Instead, they've mostly remained silent. It's almost like a sexy flex, making them that much more mysterious and that much more, susceptible to all these conspiracy theories. But it's why a lot of people suspect that they're directly linked to something bigger, like the Illuminati, or I don't know. Because why else have such a need for all that power and control? Why live such private lives when you could live like kings? Why be so sneaky in everything that you do if you're not doing anything wrong? I don't know. I get not wanting to even acknowledge the press because they might be thinking, gosh, these rumors just get crazier every day. But it's also strange that they've done just that. Remain silent. They've never denied secret meetings or their involvement in secret societies or with politicians, governments, or whatever. Or so many other historical events. It's no longer about how many numbers sit in their bank accounts. It's no longer about family legacy because they established that well over 100 years ago. Shoot, I'm not even sure if it's about power and leverage anymore because they already have it. They have had it. I really don't know why they continue to seek such control. But I think we can all agree that they're corrupt to some extent, in some way. Are they evil? I honestly don't know if we'll ever know the answer to any of these questions. But, I mean, the list goes on. I've only touched the tip of the iceberg. Couple of tidbits I wanted to slide back in at the end here because I think it's important. The Rothschilds estimated an annual income of something like $690 billion. They own over 1,800 plus luxury mansions, owning 60,000 square miles in land, 100 plus private jets, $45 billion in gold reserves, 60 plus luxury yachts, 130 plus passenger ships. They have cargo ships, oil reserves, estimated of 80 million barrels of oil. Okay.
They own or are affiliated with 110 different pharma companies, big pharma, okay? They are also involved in 19 different biotechnology firms and 75 plus animal research labs. There have been recent growing reports on the dark web that the Rothschilds are planning to auction off a majority of their arts, antiques, and assets in the upcoming months. In view of growing risk of impending World War III and doomsday scenarios, there also has been a rise in construction activity at their discrete Rothschild Island in Antarctica, which I thought was really interesting. Obviously, water is a critical resource in the coming decades, and it's increasingly being likened to commodities such as oil and gas, clean water. The Rothschild family has reportedly begun amassing large quantities of water in various underground storage sites worldwide. Current estimates suggest that their accumulated water reserve is substantial enough to supply the entire United States for a week. So, that's something to think about. Another big thing, they had a lot of involvement with COVID-19. I know that's still a sore spot for a lot of people to hear about, but I think it's important to mention. I read that the Rothschild family has stakes in approximately 70% of global pharmaceutical companies and medical distributors. So as we know, after the whole episode, they've gotten even more involved in every facet of society. Through its various subsidiaries, the family has managed the distribution of over 2 billion doses of COVID vaccines, generating revenues in the ballpark of hundreds of billions of dollars. But they're also involved with a number of big name businesses like Facebook, Google, Goldman Sachs, Hey Rockefellers, Oracle, Starbucks, Dell, Baskin-Robbins, Procter & Gamble, Airbnb, LinkedIn, Uber, and Intel, just to name a dozen. It said that more than 20% of the global maritime trade is facilitated through vessels owned by Jacob Rothschild. As per Forbes, the net worth of the Rothschild family is just under $200 billion. However, this number is not accurate as it accounts for only the official numbers. And as per unofficial sources, the Rothschild family's net worth is reported to be over $2 trillion. That's what a lot of conspiracists suspect. A lot of this isn't on paper. So, the family has a global trade network in every country, including India. Forbes has noted that the Rothschilds are like gods of the world, whom we cannot see, but all are controlled by them. So, I'll leave it at that.
It can be maddening or fun to think about, depending how far you skip down the rabbit hole. So I would just say, discover cautiously. But who knows? Anything is possible, trippy hippies. Next week, we're going to talk about the DuPont family. If you're over on YouTube watching and you've made it this far, thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. If you want to give a like to that video, share it with your friends, subscribe, makes all the difference. You can also contact us on Instagram and Facebook at Hard Talks Podcast. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, you can email me at hardtalkswithbnh@gmail.com. But in the meantime, guys, stay curious, keep exploring, stay safe, and don't go mad. Till next time, I love you so much. Stay safe out there on your New Year's and kick 2024 in the butt. Much love. Bye.